many other...
This is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to this WION Live Broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Kate Fisher, and in this bulletin, I'll bring you up to speed with the latest developing stories from all around the globe. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Taliban Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi says the blacklisting of ministers in the current government is cruel and baseless, and he calls for the US to remove them from the sanctioned list as per the Doha Agreement. Barely 2 days after meeting the top Taliban leadership in Kabul, Qatar warns it would not take responsibility for Kabul airport without clear agreements with all involved, including the Taliban. Norway's centre-left opposition parties have won Monday's general election and will now need to negotiate how to form a coalition, with climate change and a widening wealth gap expected to be central to discussions. The Kremlin says Russian President Vladimir Putin is absolutely healthy after going into self-isolation following the detection of coronavirus cases in his inner circle. New local COVID-19 infections more than doubled in China's southeastern province of Fujian, prompting officials to quickly roll out measures including travel restrictions to halt the spread of the virus. Hurricane Nicholas slams into the Texas coast, with meteorologists warning of life-threatening flooding from Mexico to storm-battered Louisiana. Amid calls for his resignation, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken defended the Biden administration's withdrawal from Afghanistan at the first congressional hearing on the ending of America's longest war. Faced with the toughest grilling of his career, Blinken remained collected, and in between heated exchanges with Republicans, he defended President Biden's decision to pull out. He repeatedly noted that former President Trump had set the withdrawal in motion and said that President Biden had inherited a deadline, not a plan. Blinken said that the Taliban had been at its strongest since 9/11 after former President Trump struck the withdrawal deal with the group back in February 2020. But he admitted that even the most pessimistic assessments did not predict the lightning-fast collapse of Kabul.
Throughout the year, we were constantly assessing their staying power and considering multiple scenarios. Even the most pessimistic assessments did not predict that government forces in Kabul would collapse while U.S. forces remained. As General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has said, nothing I or anyone else saw indicated a collapse of this army and this government in 11 days.
Republican senators also accused the administration of abandoning US citizens and allies. Blinken said that only around 100 US citizens remain in the country, all of whom have been contacted repeatedly by US diplomats. Some even left after the evacuation. Blinken also stressed that there was no evidence that staying longer would have made the Afghan forces any more resilient.
There's no evidence that staying longer would have made the Afghan security forces or the Afghan government any more resilient or self-sustaining. If 20 years and hundreds of billions of dollars in support, equipment, and training did not suffice, why would another year, another 5, another 10?
Republican lawmakers did not hesitate to double down on the criticism, describing the pullout as an unmitigated disaster of epic proportions. Fireworks ensued when Republican Senator Brian Mast of Florida stopped Blinken from answering, accusing US agencies of manipulating intelligence on Afghanistan.
I do not believe whatsoever what you're saying about the administration not working to manipulate that intelligence. To me, that is the most logical explanation of how so many in the intelligence community got this so wrong about what was going to happen in Afghanistan. Why it would seem somehow logical for President Biden to leave the, quote, most advanced military weaponry, why some would not speak out against that if they were getting the false intelligence because it was coming from the top down to manipulate it. In my opinion, that's absolutely aid and comfort to the enemy. I absolutely wonder if you were complicit in this as well. I find it hard to believe that President Biden would do that without you being aware of this. And these are things that we deserve to know better answers, have better hearings on this. I do not believe a word that you're saying on this.
Monday's hearing was the first of two appearances that Blinken will make before Congress this week to testify about Afghanistan.
Would you have the ability to stay and answer all these questions?
In what can be seen as a subtle warning to Pakistan, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the US is going to be reassessing its ties with Pakistan. Blinken made the comments while he testified in front of Congress on the hasty American pullout from Afghanistan. Blinken noted that Pakistan has harboured members of the Taliban before, including terrorists from the Haqqani network. Remember that Sirajuddin Haqqani is now the Interior Minister in the new Afghanistan government. When grilled by lawmakers if it was time for Washington to reassess its relationship with Pakistan, Blinken said that Washington planned to look at it in the coming weeks. It would consider, he said, the role played by Islamabad over the last 20 years and also the role it would like it to play in the future. When asked about how the US viewed Pakistan's involvement in Afghanistan, Blinken said that Pakistan had a multiplicity of interests, including some which were in clear conflict with the US.
To point at the role that Pakistan has played throughout the past 20 years and even before. And it is one that is involved hedging its bets constantly about the future of Afghanistan. It's one that's involved harboring members of the Taliban, including the Haqqanis. It's one that's also involved at different points, cooperation with us on counterterrorism. And so there are a number of things that have come into play. It has a multiplicity of interests, some that are in conflict, clear conflict with ours.
Earlier this month, former Afghan Vice President Amrullah Saleh had accused the Taliban of being micromanaged by Pakistan. This after Pakistan's intelligence chief visited Kabul just days after the Taliban took control of the city. Blinken laid out the complicated nature of ties with Pakistan, saying that it relied on a variety of factors. First was Pakistan always hedging its bets about the future of Afghanistan while it harbours members of terrorist organisations. It has also at different times cooperated with the US on counter-terrorism. Blinken said that Pakistan's varying interests have in the past both worked against and in favour of US interests. He also said that India's involvement in Afghanistan had influenced Pakistan's actions, which were detrimental to Washington. On India, Blinken said that the US was deeply engaged with New Delhi regarding the situation, especially regarding the over-the-horizon assistance, if needed.
Say generally, Congressman, we're deeply engaged with India across the board. With regard, though, to any specifics about over-the-horizon capabilities and the plans that we put in place, or will continue to put in place.
The United States and Western countries are in a difficult balancing act in the aftermath of the Taliban's victory. Pakistan has had deep ties with the Taliban and has been accused of supporting the group as it battled the US-backed government in Kabul for 20 years, charges denied by Islamabad. It is also considered as one of the two countries, along with Qatar, with the most influence over the Taliban, and a place where many senior Taliban leaders were thought to have escaped to after the US-led invasion of Afghanistan in 2001. There's less than a week to go before the high-stakes election in Canada. Recent polls show that Liberals are recovering from an early setback as Prime Minister Trudeau gains approval on his pandemic response. The big question is, will support be enough for Trudeau to form a majority, or will Canadians give O'Toole a chance? That's what our next report explores.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said that if re-elected, he would ban people from protesting outside hospitals. He accused his main rival from the Conservative Party of supporting those who are anti-vaccine.
That the Liberal Party of Canada, if re-elected to form government, will make it a criminal offence to block access to buildings that provide health care. Whether that's hospitals, clinics, abortion clinics, pharmacies, testing centers. It is not okay that across the country, hospitals are having to put up barricades today to manage the mobs coming their way. Now that he's gone,
opinion polls say victory looks uncertain for Trudeau. He had decided to call for an early vote, a chance for his government to capitalize on handling of the pandemic. But a lackluster campaign and public anger over the snap elections seem to be getting in the way. Recent polls show that ruling Liberals have somewhat recovered. They have 33% support. They need 38% public support to secure a majority. Conservative Party leader Erin O'Toole is Trudeau's main opposition. He has repeatedly condemned the vote call as a cynical power grab, a message that seems to have resonated with Canadians. Canadians go to the polls on the 20th of September. Trudeau argues that the pandemic has changed Canada like World War II did, and Canadians should choose who they want to make important decisions. He has struggled to explain why holding the election amid the fourth wave of COVID-19 is a good idea. The opposition accuses the Liberals of putting Canadians in harm's way for personal ambition. What are the main issues this time around? The Liberals ran up a record national debt of more than $785 billion US. Opposition says if elected, they will balance the books. Employment of women has plummeted due to the pandemic. Liberals have promised to set up a national childcare program. They are willing to spend billions of Canadian dollars. Conservatives say they will offer tax credits to help pay for daycare. Climate change also dominates the agenda. Liberals promise more aggressive emission cuts than the Conservatives. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Certain celebrities, politicians and other high-profile users of Facebook are exempted from some of its rules, according to a report in the Wall Street Journal newspaper. This is a quality control mechanism as part of a program called crosscheck or xcheck. Facebook claims to apply rules equally, yet its crosscheck program shields millions of elite users from the very rules that ordinary users are subject to. Facebook spokesman Andy Stone attempted to refute the accusations stated in the WSJ report. Stone defended the program but admitted that the social media giant was not perfect in enforcing its rules. In response to the report, Stone says, and I quote here, "Crosscheck simply means that some content from certain pages or profiles is given a second layer of review to make sure that we've applied our policies correctly." In the same thread, Stone criticises the Wall Street Journal, saying its report implies that Facebook was not clear about politicians not being able to speak freely on the platform. Elaborating more on the crosscheck programme, Stone says, and I quote, This typically applies to high-profile, regularly visited pages or pieces of content on Facebook, so that they're not mistakenly removed or left up. Many media organisations' pages are cross-checked. We may also cross-check reports on content posted by celebrities, governments, or pages where we've made mistakes in the past. Stone also admits that Facebook's enforcement is not perfect and there are trade-offs between speed and accuracy. The WSJ report itself talks about how some high-profile people, like football star Neymar, for instance, put up a post showing nude images of a woman who accused him of rape, which Facebook subsequently removed. Facebook has given multiple assurances to an independent board that was set up as a final arbiter of disputes with regard to content moderation. John Taylor, spokesperson for Facebook's Independent Oversight Board, has said, and I quote, "The Oversight Board has expressed on multiple occasions its concern about the lack of transparency in Facebook's content moderation processes, especially relating to the company's inconsistent management of high-profile accounts. Some users are indeed whitelisted, that is, given protection from enforcement action," cites the WSJ article. But these so-called whitelisted accounts have shared false claims, such as how Hillary Clinton had allegedly covered up paedophile rings and that former President Donald Trump had called all refugees seeking asylum animals. In 2020, at least 5.8 million users were subject to cross-check protocols. A southeastern province of China, which saw an initial lull in COVID-19 cases, is witnessing a sudden surge due to the Delta variant. The surge is just ahead of the week-long national holiday starting next month, which will see tourists flocking to the province. As per the National Health Commission, cases almost doubled in the Fujian province of China, which reported 59 fresh cases, up from 22 cases yesterday. Fujian, which borders Zhejiang and Guangdong, reported over 100 cases in just 4 days, causing concerns in those nearby provinces. The current outbreak is the biggest in weeks and comes just after China declared that the Delta variant was under control. The city of Putian, where the outbreak initially started, has ordered testing for all of its residents, and it shut down schools as the threat of the Delta variant looms over unvaccinated children. Authorities have indicated that the first case in the cluster was a man who recently returned from Singapore, who initially tested negative for the virus. The man's 12-year-old son and a classmate were among the first patients detected in the cluster last week, shortly after the new school term began. The variant then raced through classrooms, infecting more than 36 children. Now, North Sea oil was discovered off the coast of Norway in the 1960s. The findings changed the country's prospects, making it one of the world's largest oil exporters. More than 60 years down the line, calls to shut down the industry have been growing. Can Norway's prominent petroleum industry survive this criticism? Our next report has the details.
Norway is among the world's largest oil producers. Petroleum industry has made significant contributions to its economic development. In fact, the oil sector accounts for 14% of the Scandinavian countries' GDP. But as temperatures rise across the world, many have begun raising concerns over the environmental impact of the fossil fuels. From politicians to activists, calls to turn off the oil taps are growing.
We have good competence that we can bring into the green shift, but oil and gas harms our planet. That's why we have to make a change and move away from it as fast as possible.
The impact is also being felt across universities. Despite the lure of high salaries, fewer students are willing to work in the petroleum industry. Oil engineering departments have been struggling to fill their seats.
I study petroleum because I think it's very interesting. I want to contribute to the future. Maybe try to make oil a bit more environment friendly. It is already heading there. And when I get a bit more experience and finish my master's degree here, I hope to get a job in a company where I can contribute to that.
The petroleum industry feels that it is being subjected to harsh criticism. It insists that it has taken steps to reduce its carbon footprint.
The oil and gas production in Norway is very important for the Norwegian economy and Norwegian jobs. It would have very serious and big consequences for Norway if we had stopped that. It would also not be positive for the climate if we stopped Norwegian oil production, because Norwegian oil and gas production is the production that has the lowest carbon footprint of all the oil-producing regions.
There are no clear solutions to the problem. Norway is divided between oil and gas industry's economic benefits and environmental impacts. But the database is likely to go on. Bureau Report WION, World is One.
Now, after more than a year of virtual red carpets and digital-only awards ceremonies, fashion's biggest event of the year has returned. Home to some of the biggest and the most outrageous style statements of all time, the Met Gala is renowned for being the ultimate sartorial spectacle. Each year, the most famous celebrities and designers make a splash with their extravagant and outrageous outfits. Here's a look at some of the highlights from this year's event. That looks so much fun. And that's a wrap on WION's live broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Kate Fisher, signing off. I'll see you next time. For more news and updates, though, stay tuned to WION World is One.
This is right, Arab.